Morning. It is October 6, 2021. Welcome to 7 to 9 Minutes in the Word of God. My name is Brian. I'm one of the pastors at Converge Church in Omaha, Nebraska. The webpage is convergechurchomaha.org. Please like the Converge Church page on Facebook, and the YouTube channel is called 7 to 9 Minutes in the Word of God. We're looking at the subject of the Christian and mental health. Some Christians see things like depression and bipolar as simply faith issues. A Christian's depression then can be cured through prayer or a stronger faith or deeper commitment to the Lord. Some will even claim that true believers don't suffer from depression. So that means that believers like Martin Luther, Charles Spurgeon, Mother Teresa, David Brainerd, C.S. Lewis, John Calvin, John Wesley, Handel, Charles Dickens, Emily Dickinson, Sir Isaac Newton, and William Cowper. The list can go on and on. Were not true believers because they all suffered with depression. It also means that Elijah, Jeremiah, and David in the Bible were not true followers of God because most likely they all suffered with depression. Let's take a closer look at David's situation in Psalm 13. So Psalm 13 we're going to be looking at. And we see in this psalm that David felt abandoned and he was on the verge of despair. We see that abandonment in verse 1. Again, Psalm 13, verse 1. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? So overwhelming loneliness goes together with depression. David longed to know the duration of his suffering. How long, O Lord, he would cry out. In verse 2, we read, How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? So David felt abandoned by God. His life was, as Sam Storms puts it, enveloped in darkness. And depression will do that. It is a period of deep darkness, and we can't find the light switch. David was in despair. Sorrow was in his heart all day long, and there was no attempt on his part to whitewash the situation. Things were not okay with David. You know, on Sunday mornings when we're in church, what is our typical response when someone asks us how we're doing? We typically say, fine. Things are good. Thanks for asking. But there are times when we say fine and they're not fine. If the statistics are correct about Christians and mental illness, then many Christians on Sunday mornings are struggling with depression or some other mental disorder. It's my understanding that 1 out of 4 evangelical Christians will suffer with a mental illness at one time or another. And so this is something that we do need to keep talking about. We need to be open about it. We need to remove the stigma. And so that's one of the purposes of the 7 to 9 minutes as we're focusing on mental health in the last couple times. And then we're going to move forward for a number of episodes as well. Again, things are not always fine. 4 times in verses 1 and 2, David cries out, How long will this ever end? You know, depression often is in cycles. Long, dark winters are not good for those who struggle with depression. One summer many years ago, my family and I were in Norway, a northern European nation that has, during the summertime, it's like 24 hours of sunlight. Nice. But during the winter, it's just the opposite. 24 hours of darkness or close to it. And our Norwegian tour bus driver said that many people are allowed several weeks of vacation per year, and many will use that vacation time during the winter and go south where there's sunlight. And if you just Google the words depression in Norway, you'll see that why many people head south for the winter. Now, going back to Psalm 13, we see in verses 3 to 4 that David was also in a life-threatening situation because of an enemy. In verses 3 and 4, we read, Consider and answer me, my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemies say, I have prevailed over him. Lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. You know, this threat would only make David's depression worse. Again, refer to Matthew Stanford in his wonderful book, Grace for the Afflicted. He writes that mental disorders result from a complex interaction of biological and environmental factors. So you got the biological, you got nature, you got the environmental, you got the nurture. And because of the fall of man, we're all born with various degrees of predispositions or these biological vulnerabilities that can develop into mental health disorders. And some people have greater predispositions than others. Now, again, mental illness is a combination between the biological and the environment. When the predisposition interacts with a stressful event in the environment, then that will cause the onset of the mental illness. So if a person's predisposition towards mental illness is high, it's not going to take much stress to trigger that mental disorder. So in David's situation, if he had a biological predisposition towards mental illness, then Psalm 13, along with many other Psalms, make much more sense. He wrote 78 Psalms, and over half of them are laments, expressing his grief and his sorrow. If David struggled with depression, and I think he did, then some of his behavior in the Bible makes much more sense. Just as a reminder, David was the second king of Israel. He ruled over 70 years. God chose David to succeed King Saul because David was a man after his own heart, after God's own heart. And yet there are indications, there are signs in David's life that he struggled with depression. For example, why in 2 Samuel chapter 11 did King David not go out and lead his troops in the springtime in battle when the other kings were doing that? He stayed back, and that led to his adultery with Bathsheba. Well, consider the fact that depression will cause a person to see normal daily activities as overwhelmingly impossible. We also see in that story, we're going to take a look at it next time a little deeper, but that David was asleep in the middle of the afternoon. Maybe he was sleeping the whole day. Again, another sign of depression. But again, we'll take a closer look at that next time we meet in our next episode. We're going to continue our look at the Christian and mental health, and I appreciate you viewing this episode in 7 to 9 minutes, and I hope you're having a great day. Hey, Don, good to see you. Thanks for interacting. And until then, have a great rest of the week and a great week, and the Lord bless.